So when we look at differences between young athletes and adults, from a physiological standpoint, what are some of the big things that stand out that then again start to inform how a nutrition protocol is going to be different for a youth athlete versus an adult athlete?
Yeah, so I guess probably the biggest thing is just the size differences. The youth athlete is smaller individual, of course. But then if we look at some of the physiological and metabolic, there's a whole host of different. They have different thermoregulation mechanisms, the youth athletes, which again develop and mature as the individual develops and matures. So, they don't sweat as much. They lose. Sorry, this is a youth athlete, or particularly a pre-pubertal athlete. They dissipate heat in different ways to an adult, and those change throughout growth and maturation. Again, pre-pubertal and circa pubertal athletes have reduced glycolytic capabilities, so they predominantly use more fat as a substrate, and therefore have higher rates of aerobic metabolism. So there's some of the different physiological and metabolic differences.
I think that one, the reduced glycogen capacity is definitely one that is such a stark contrast to adults and even older, later teens and early 20s, and one that, again, if from a youth level, we obviously have a lot of coaches and practitioners, and if it's recreational elite sport, that are giving recommendations that don't have some of this background. And so it's important, a distinction for them to be able to know those sort of differences.
Yeah, certainly. And, if you look at from say team sport or your endurance sport, your classical, carbohydrate loading, we know these youth athletes don't have the capabilities or capacity to store this glycogen in the same fashion that adults do, even in relative terms. So, probably not appropriate to carbohydrate load some of these
for sure,
particularly pubertal or those in and around puberty.
And Marcus, with the value then of drip feeding and carbohydrate, I mean, if there's an increased reliance on exogenous carbohydrates in these youth athletes, do we need to make sure that we're kind of slowly and steadily drip feeding this in throughout the day?
Yeah, I mean, certainly during exercise, as you've alluded to, greater reliance on exogenous, so consumed carbohydrate, not stored endogenous carbohydrate. So I think, certainly in sort of moderate to high intensity exercise of any decent duration, 60 minutes plus, it probably goes against what, a lot of the general population guidelines are. But, for these sort of youth athletes, let's call them, I think there's certainly the evidence would suggest.
It's such a hard topic, isn't it, for parents to kind of, in their minds, we think of general health and general population and what we would do for clients who are trying to lose 20 or 30 pounds, or all the messaging that we get and around that. And of course, with a youth athlete and with athletes in general, the rules of the game are a little bit different. And so, as you mentioned there, it can be a struggle for coaches or parents to sort of be able to view things in that lens. Do you find?
Certainly. And I think that's where, you as a practitioner working with youth athletes, of course you have to educate the athlete himself, but particularly when you're working with a youth athlete, parents, it's as important to educate the parents or guardians of those individuals, because let's face the facts, those probably from under 16 or even under 18, the parents really dictate what's put in the shopping basket, what's cooked, what's put in front of them, in terms of types of food, amounts of food. So, the parents really need the education as much as the youth athlete.
Absolutely. You probably extend that up to under 23, even. It's a lot of, the meals are being cooked at home, and we got to get the whole family on board and just be seeing things in a little bit different way, especially if mom and dad might be struggling with the various health conditions, because it is almost eating opposite to the recommendations that they might be given.
Yeah, certainly.